In the middle of a silent graveyard, a police K-9 refused to stop digging. At first, officers thought it was nothing more than old soil being disturbed. But what he uncovered beneath those graves left the entire team frozen in shock. What could be buried there that no one ever spoke about? Here's the full story, but before we get into it, make sure you've hit subscribe, because the next story we share might just be even more unbelievable, and you definitely don't want to miss it. The cemetery sat on the edge of town, tucked behind rusting iron gates and rows of ancient oaks whose branches curled like skeletal fingers. Though the townspeople visited occasionally to leave flowers, it was a place most avoided after dusk. Its weathered headstones, many tilted or cracked with age, carried names long forgotten by living relatives. The silence of the graveyard was a silence that clung. But on this particular night, silence was not what greeted Officer Mark and his K-9 partner Rex. Instead, the graveyard rang with the sharp scrape of paws against earth. Rex, normally disciplined and measured, had suddenly bolted toward a neglected corner of the cemetery, his leash strained taut, his claws digging furiously at the base of an old headstone. He growled low, not in aggression toward a threat, but in the determined way of a dog who had discovered something that should not be ignored. Mark called out to him, commanding calm, but Rex refused to obey. Every muscle in his body screamed urgency. His ears were pinned back, tail rigid, nose buried in the soil. This was not normal behavior. Mark had worked with Rex for years. He trusted the dog's instincts that had uncovered drugs hidden inside walls, weapons buried under floorboards, and even missing persons concealed in dense brush. Rex never acted without reason. And tonight, in this forgotten graveyard, his refusal to stop meant something important lay beneath. The headstone before Rex was faded and chipped, its engraving nearly erased by time. Only the faint outline of a name remained. Harriet Lane, 1879 to 1903. Whoever she had died young, more than a century ago. So why was Rex clawing at her resting place? The dirt was loose in patches, as though recently disturbed. Mark crouched beside it, his flashlight beam catching small ridges in the soil. Not the smooth, settled earth of a grave untouched for decades, but uneven, almost hurriedly filled in. The realization chilled him. Someone had been here. Rex's growls deepened as he dug harder, his claws scraping against what sounded like stone or wood. He paused only to sniff the ground, his nose twitching furiously, then resumed with renewed determination. Mark radioed for backup. A graveyard at midnight, a police dog refusing to stop, and ground that looked freshly turned. Nothing about it felt right. Within minutes, 2 more officers arrived. Together with shovels from the patrol trunk, they began to clear the disturbed soil. The air grew heavy, the only sound the crunch of metal striking dirt and Rex's labored breaths. Then came the hollow thud. Wood, but not the rotted remains of a century-old coffin. This wood was fresh, its edges sharp where the shovel split the soil. It did not belong in Harriet Lane's grave. The officers exchanged glances, unease flashing across their faces. They pulled more earth away until the outline of a small wooden box emerged. About the size of a chest, it had been buried shallowly, as though whoever placed it there had been in a hurry. Rex barked sharply, circling the pit, his eyes locked on the box. Mark crouched, brushing dirt from the surface. The box bore no markings, no lock, only a nailed-down lid. Its wood was damp but intact, too new to have been part of the original grave. This was no coffin. This was something else. Why bury a box in a graveyard? And why here, in a grave already claimed by history? The officers hesitated. Opening it could destroy potential evidence, but leaving it closed would solve nothing. The mystery pressed heavily on them, the weight of Rex's growl urging action. They pried the lid open. Inside, wrapped carefully in layers of plastic and cloth, was something unexpected. Old photographs. Dozens of them, bundled with twine, their edges yellowed but preserved. The photos showed faces, families, children, men and women standing stiffly before houses long gone. Some bore handwritten notes on the back. Summer 1964, Christmas 1972, our first home. But the deeper they dug, the stranger it became. Beneath the photographs lay trinkets, a rusted locket, a child's toy car, a broken wristwatch. Personal things, intimate things, the kind people keep in drawers, not bury under headstones. It was not treasure. It was not contraband. It looked like someone's memories had been hidden underground. The discovery left more questions than answers. Who had placed these here? Why hide something so personal in a graveyard, in a box buried under someone else's name? Rex pawed again at the earth, as though the box was not the end. His nose pressed low, sniffing deeper into the grave, growling at something still unseen. Mark felt his chest tighten. The box was strange enough, but Rex's behavior told him there was more. This was no random burial. The earth shifted again under the shovel, and a foul, unfamiliar smell rose from the soil. It was faint but unmistakable, the kind of smell that came not from photographs or trinkets, but from something that should not have been disturbed. The officers stopped, the night air thick with dread. Was this more than a box of memories? Was something or someone buried here who should not be? As the digging continued, the shape of something larger emerged. Not wood this time, not a box. Something covered in tarp, tightly bound and tucked against the earth as though deliberately hidden beneath Harriet Lane's grave. Rex barked again, sharper now, his body rigid, tail high. His instincts screamed that the truth was just inches away. Mark wiped sweat from his brow despite the chill of the night air. His hands trembled slightly on the shovel. The box of photographs had been only the beginning. What lay beneath the tarp was the real secret, and the reason Rex had refused to move. And when they uncovered it fully, it would leave everyone speechless. The officers worked in silence, every scrape of the shovels echoing across the still cemetery. The deeper they dug, the more the soil gave way to the unmistakable outline of something deliberately hidden. The tarp glistened faintly under the flashlight beams, wet and slick with earth. It had been tied with rope, knotted tightly as though its contents had been meant to stay concealed forever. Rex's growls grew louder, but there was no aggression in them, only urgency as though warning his human partners not to stop now. His body remained tense, muscles quivering, eyes fixed on the buried bundle. Finally, the tarp came free. Carefully, the officers pulled it onto solid ground and began to undo the ropes. The knots were stubborn, old but strong, resisting even as hands worked them loose. When the tarp unfolded, it revealed not the horror many feared, but something entirely different. Inside was another box, larger this time, crafted of dark wood and sealed with rusting hinges. Dust and soil clung to it, but unlike the first small chest of photographs, this one carried weight both physically and symbolically. Mark knelt beside it, shining his light across the surface. Carved faintly into the lid were initials, D.H. The letters meant nothing at first, but the moment they were spoken aloud, one of the older officers stiffened. "Harper," he muttered. The Harper name lingered in town like a ghost. Decades ago, the Harper family had lived near the cemetery in a farmhouse long since abandoned. Their story was one of tragedy whispered over generations. A fire had gutted the home, claiming the parents and leaving behind only a son, Daniel Harper, who was sent away to distant relatives. Some said he had returned years later, wandering the outskirts of town, unable to let go of the past. Others claimed he disappeared altogether. But the initials on the box buried beneath Harriet Lane's grave breathed life into those whispers. Could this be tied to the Harper boy? And if so, why bury his belongings here in secret? The officers pried the lid open. Inside lay an unsettling collection. Letters, carefully folded and tied with string. A stack of notebooks, their covers frayed and edges stained with damp. More trinkets, a silver hairpin, a child's rag doll with one button eye, a man's pipe, a cracked photograph frame with no picture inside. It was not the contents themselves that unsettled the officers, but the way they had been stored, buried beneath a stranger's grave, sealed away as though meant to be hidden from the world. Mark lifted one of the notebooks. The handwriting inside was uneven, jagged at times, calmer at others, but clearly written by the same hand. The entries began plainly, March 12, 1978. They do not understand. The house is not empty. I still hear them. I still see them. The land remembers. The more he read, the stranger it became. April 3, 1978. I cannot leave them here alone. If they take them, I will have nothing left. I buried it where no one looks. The cemetery keeps its secrets. The notebook seemed to spiral between grief and paranoia. Whoever had written it was consumed by loss, convinced of shadows watching from the woods, voices whispering from the graves. And then one entry stood out. July 14, 1980. I left the photographs first. Now I leave the rest. One day they will know the truth. But not yet, not until the ground gives it back. The ground had indeed given it back thanks to Rex. The officers documented everything, but the mystery only grew. Why had Daniel Harper, or whoever DH was, buried his family's past in a cemetery? Why not keep the items or destroy them instead of hiding them beneath someone else's headstone? Mark could not shake the thought that it was not random. Rex's instincts had led them here for a reason deeper than chance. And Rex was not done yet. As the officers packed up the boxes for evidence, the dog pulled sharply toward the far side of the cemetery. His body tensed again, nose pressed low to the ground, leading them past rows of weathered graves to the edge of a willow tree. There, hidden among the roots, lay another disturbance in the earth. A smaller mound this time, but clear enough to see it had been tampered with. The digging began again. Beneath the tree roots, wrapped in plastic sheeting, was not a box, but a bundle. Carefully unrolled, it revealed more notebooks, at least half a dozen alongside a stack of old newspaper clippings. The headlines told fragments of a story long forgotten. Harper family farmhouse destroyed by fire. Surviving son sent away after tragedy. Unconfirmed sightings of Harper boy near town. The articles confirmed what the townsfolk had always whispered. But the notebooks added another dimension. One read, I hear them in the graves. Not voices, but memories. The land holds what the people forget. I must protect it. I must protect them. If the world finds them, they will vanish forever, just like my family. It was becoming clear. Daniel Harper had buried pieces of his family's past. Not only their belongings, but his own memories, hidden away where he believed they would be safe. The cemetery was not a place of fear to him, but of preservation. Back at the station, investigators pieced everything together. The gravesite caches were not evidence of crime, but of obsession. Daniel Harper had spent his life battling grief, trying to keep fragments of his family safe by hiding them where no one would disturb them. But one question remained. Why had Rex been so insistent? Why this grave, this night? The answer came when the photographs were examined closely. Among the faded images of family gatherings and portraits was one that stood out. A little boy, smiling faintly, holding the very same rag doll they had found in the box. On the back, in careful script, was written, Daniel, age 4. Rex had not only uncovered buried objects, he had uncovered a lost story, the childhood and tragedy of the very boy who had once lived among them. The deeper they dug into the notebooks, the more they found references to someone Daniel believed was coming for him. They appeared again and again, sometimes shadowy watchers in the woods, other times unnamed strangers who would take everything he had left. But the final notebook held something different. Its last entry, written shakily, read, If they find this, it means Rex was right to dig. Maybe now they will know I was never trying to hurt. I was only trying to hold on. Tell them the Harpers loved. Tell them I never forgot. The words struck deep. Daniel Harper had lived a life consumed by grief, but even in his solitude, his heart had clung to love. The items were preserved, cataloged, and eventually turned over to the town's historical society. For the first time, the Harper family was remembered not as a tragedy whispered about, but as real people whose lives, love, and loss mattered. The cemetery became a place of remembrance, not fear. The townspeople even restored the Harper headstone, adding an inscription to honor Daniel alongside his parents. And the child's rag doll, once buried in the dirt, was cleaned and placed in a glass case in the town hall, labeled simply Harper Family Keepsake, 1900s. Rex, the dog who refused to stop digging, became the town's quiet hero. His instincts had uncovered not just boxes, but a story buried under decades of silence. He had given voice to the forgotten and closure to a community that had long carried unanswered questions. For Mark, the image of Rex standing over that grave, growling until the truth was unearthed, would never fade. It was proof that sometimes mysteries were solved not by force or evidence alone, but by the unwavering loyalty of a dog who simply knew when something was wrong. What the dog found beneath left everyone speechless because it was not horror, but the rediscovery of love lost and a family finally remembered. If you enjoyed how Rex uncovered this hidden mystery, just imagine the stories you'll miss if you don't stick around. Every day we uncover real moments where animals change everything. So before you go, hit subscribe and drop a like because the next story might just be the one you can't stop thinking about.